Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome to episode 20 of Paranormal Axetivities with your host, Ben Axe. And coming up in just a few minutes, we have Russell Barton from the podcast Coffee Breath Conversations. He has a few stories from his childhood, from his teenage years, and from working in a prison. Can't wait to get into that conversation. But first, I have a few announcements. And then I have the paranormal activities of the week. So let's get into it. So first things first, guys, not only am I on Pandora now. Yeah, you heard me. We are now officially on Pandora. So you can listen to Pandora in your car. You can listen to music. And you can also listen to paranormal activities. And also, there is official Paranormal Axetivities merchandise. That's right, merchandise. So if you go to teespring.com/stores/paranormal-activities, I know, guys, it's a mouthful. I will also put it in the show's description, so you don't have to remember it, because I can't remember it. But again, if you can remember things, you can find my merchandise, which contains t-shirts, hoodies, coffee mugs, face masks, drapes, all kinds of stuff. And I'm going to add new things all the time. So there's going to be multiple types of t-shirts, multiple types of hoodies, different designs, different logos, that kind of stuff. But again, it is teespring.com/stores/paranormal-activities is where you will find all the Paranormal Activities podcast merchandise. Pretty excited about that. I'm going to order a bunch of stuff myself, and yeah, that's pretty cool. So let's get into the activities of the week. There's two. I did miss last week. There was no new episode last week. I got busy. I didn't tell you guys. It just happened. I planned to do one, and then like Tuesday came and it didn't happen. Sorry, guys. But because of the week off last week, I think that left some time for a couple of things to kind of go down. So let's just get into it here. About a week ago or so, a little over a week ago, Danae and I started talking about our Halloween party. We did a Halloween party last year. Her and I both love Halloween. I'm obsessed with Halloween, as you people who know me in real life already know. And we're planning a Halloween party for October 31st, which happens to be a Saturday, which is fucking awesome. So, we were talking about it, and it's August now, but it was July when this happened. Again, it's August 2nd today, so it's like, barely August. But, at the end of July, we were talking about it. I'm like, oh yeah, we're going to have a party, we're going to do this, 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 we're going to do this. We were talking about it. And so, that being said, the past 3 years, we've decorated pretty hardcore for Halloween. I'm not going to say it's like fantastic, but we do some pretty cool things. And one of our decorations are like a line of butcher knives that we put around the perimeter of the kitchen. They're fake, but it's full of like knives, butcher knives. I don't know. There's multiple different kinds of knives. I'm not sure the names of these knives, but there's like 3 or 4 different kinds, and they're in a big line, and we hung them around the perimeter of the kitchen, and it looks like a fucking butcher shop around the kitchen. And we've had these things for about 3 years now. And so last week, again, we talked about our party, and then about 2 days later, I believe it was Tuesday, so, this past Tuesday, I wake up, I go downstairs, I drink my coffee, and I'm sitting in my living room. And under the coffee table, I happen to see one of these Halloween decoration knives under the coffee table. And we put our decorations away in November, right? So I haven't seen this decoration since November. And it was now July at this point. So 7 months I haven't seen it. We talked about our Halloween decorations and Halloween decorating coming up, and the next day I find this Halloween knife decoration sitting under a coffee table. No idea where it came from. That being said, we do have a new kitten, and she tends to get into things, as kittens do. But we've had her for like a month or two now, and that's kind of a coincidence, right? And I don't even know where this decoration would have come from, because as far as I know, all of our Halloween decorations are in a closet upstairs. In my theater room, there's like a deep closet, and that's where all our Halloween shit is. And so clearly she couldn't get in there because the door's closed, and it's behind my movie theater screen. So like, in order to get into it, you have to like move my shit out of the way, open it up, get into it. It's a big hassle even for me, and there's no way a cat could fucking do it. So, and I'm thinking, maybe it was like in a drawer somewhere downstairs, like, one or two fell, and maybe we put it somewhere. But I don't know where. I was trying to figure it out. I was trying to rationalize where this decoration came from. And I don't know. I really don't know, guys. And it's possible the cat found it somewhere. I just didn't know it was in somewhere, and she found it and took it out. But, dude, it's been 7 months since I've seen these decorations. And as far as I know, they're put away in storage. And so that was interesting to me. And as soon as I saw it, I'm like, that's fucked up. Because it was sitting right where I would see it when I sit down to drink coffee. It was insane. So that happened early in the week, and then a few days later, again in the morning, I get up around 5 a.m., and I get in the shower around 5:30 a.m. That's every day, Monday through Friday. So I get in the shower, and as soon as this is like probably 2 or 3 days later, I think I tweeted this one actually, so I could, if I went back and looked, I could tell you the exact day. It might have been Wednesday even. I don't fucking know. It was a couple days later, though. I'm in the shower. I get out of the shower. As soon as I open the door and step out in front of the sink, I immediately smell cigarette smoke. I don't smoke cigarettes. Danae does not smoke cigarettes. My cats do not smoke cigarettes. My dog does not smoke cigarettes. We've lived in this house for a year and a half, and not one time have I smelled cigarette smoke inside my house. Now, that being said, a former resident of this house, I'm not sure many people have lived here, but I know for a fact a former resident of the house did smoke. So, and there's a lot of science, I guess, behind the smell of cigarette smoke in a house. They say that, if somebody smoked in the house, that smell will linger for years, and when the house settles in a right way, the smoke can kind of come out the walls, that kind of stuff. Sure, and I believe that too. I'm sure that's a thing. But I haven't lived in this house. I mean, I've lived in the house for a year and a half, and I had none of that smell. And it just so happens that some shit went down in my wife's side of the family where somebody passed away. And then immediately, right after we talk about Halloween, and then we find that decoration, and then a few days later, I smell cigarette smoke. It was all very weird timing to me. And we talk about those feelings and stuff, right? Well, I honestly feel we had some stuff going down last week in my house. And the knife thing, I think they were both friendly. That was what's interesting about it. There was no negative feelings. And then the same day that I smelled the cigarette smoke, though, Danae called me a little bit later that day. I was at work, and she was like, "Hey, I need you to sage the house tonight." I'm like, "Oh, why?" I kind of played. It was weird because when I went downstairs that same morning, I felt something. Like, I smelled the cigarette smoke. Well, actually, before that happened, I went downstairs, I felt something, and then when I was in the shower, I smelled the smoke. And I didn't tell her any of that, but then she calls me a little bit later, and she's like, "Hey, I need you to sage." So, we both felt something that morning, and, separate from each other. It was interesting. And, there is no end game. That's the stories, man. I found a Halloween decoration that shouldn't have been there after we talked about Halloween, and I smelled cigarette smoke in my bathroom at 5:30 a.m. both of which are pretty unexplained. You could rationalize both, probably, I guess. But that's it. That's my stories. I believe they're both paranormal experiences. And that's it. So, that being said, I do have an awesome guest lined up here. He is on the phone right now. His name is Russell Barton. He is the host of Coffee Breath Conversations, which you can find on all your major podcasting platforms, Apple Music, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. He has some awesome stories to tell, so let's get right into it. Russell Barton, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I appreciate you being on the show. I'm very excited to talk to you. We've talked a little bit via text about your past experiences, and I can't wait to get into them. So, man, I'm pumped. But before that, let's talk about your podcast for a sec. I know you have a podcast called Coffee Breath Conversations. Tell us about that for a second. Like, what
Yeah,
kind of got what?
yeah. My podcast. It's really just a small podcast. Uh, just wanted to interview people. Just kind of everyone's got an interesting story to tell, and it's turned out that a few more people than I thought are really into conspiracy theories. So it's kind of ended up taking a turn where we're talking a lot about conspiracy theories. I just finished an episode with my buddy Tyler, and with the Epstein document drop and all that sort of stuff. So we were talking about that, and it's fun. It's different. It's interesting. I've also interviewed different businesses around town, and I'm hoping just to continue talking to people and generating content that's hopefully meaningful for people.
That's awesome, and I really like that. I like the idea of it's not about the trying to get numbers and that kind of stuff, but the fact that you want it to be meaningful and you're taking the time to talk to your community. And you mentioned the conspiracy theories. People like conspiracy theories. It's just an interesting topic, and I get why people like that kind of stuff. I'm into it. So that's really cool. And so be sure to check out Russell's podcast, Coffee Break Conversations. It's available on most major platforms, Spotify, Apple Music, all of those platforms. So, again, man, I appreciate you being on the show here on Paranormal Activities. And let's talk about the paranormal here for a little while. So I know you mentioned in the past that you have had experiences from when you were a kid, when you were a teenager, and then while working in a prison. So let's just start from the beginning. So first off, I know you've had experiences, I guess, but what's your, if you can tell me, I guess, what's your actual belief when it comes to the paranormal? Like what's your idea of the paranormal?
Well, to be honest, I'm not too sure if I believe 100% in ghosts. I mean, I'm kind of agnostic in general, so I'm the if I was to say that ghosts exist for sure, then that would have to mean that I would validate life after death. So it's kind of put me in a bit of a paradoxical situation here.
And I absolutely 100% agree with that because it's hard to say this is this and then that is that. And I'm with you. Like, I'm not 100% religious. I'm not 100% believing in anything, but I do believe in ghosts. And so believing in ghosts believes in the afterlife, like you just said, and that creates controversy in my own head. So I like the way you worded that because I'm with you. I really have a hard time believing in a lot of things. And that's why this show kind of started, was to try to figure out what's really going on and to take everybody's experiences and try to piece the puzzle together of what's really going on in the afterlife. But let's start at the beginning. So you said you had some stories from when you were a kid. Let's hear about them.
Yeah, stories when I was a kid, I'd say probably when I was about 7 or 8 years old. I woke up one night and I had that eerie feeling like you're being watched, and a it's like a permanent memory in my brain. I remember I woke up, I looked over to where the doorway to my bedroom was, and there was a lady that was standing there, and she was kind of like a white figure, and I just stared for a bit in disbelief, like, what is going on? How do you even begin to, at that age, begin to quantify what you're seeing? And I remember at one point I got freaked out, so I looked away, for probably at the time felt like forever. And I looked back and it was gone. And then I guess over the years, every once in a while, I would wake up and look over, and again, she would be standing in the doorway, just looking. And I remember the one day I got up and I started walking towards the door and just vanished. And I used to think, okay, well, you get a little bit older and that, okay, maybe it's just a dream, maybe it's sleep paralysis. Who knows?
Absolutely. Um, but like, how often did that happen? Do you think? I know you said like how, if you can tell me, I guess, how many different times do you think that occurred?
I'd probably say at least once a month.
That's pretty crazy. That's what I've only and I've had two experiences like that where I saw an actual person, and it was over a year and a half, and I saw her twice, and that's why I really like that story because that's a lot of energy. So when you saw that person, was it? I just have to ask for my own personal knowledge, I guess. Um, was it a full person, or could you like see through her?
It was sort of see through. It was kind of ethereal. It wasn't 100% there, but I could see the figure. I could see the outline. I could tell that it was a female at the time, and I never was freaked out like it was going to harm me. It was just there.
And that matches my experience too, which is I think is very interesting. I have a story to where I lived in a haunted house. I guess quotations around the word haunted, but I lived in a house where things were happening, and it was the same idea. I saw the female. She was in my story. She was wearing a white nightgown, and she had long black frizzy hair, and I saw her twice in a year and a half time span. And I've learned through my travels in the paranormal universe here that a lot of people see a shape similar to that or a figure similar to that. So do you remember what she was wearing at all? Like,
Yeah, it was similar to a nightgown type of outfit,
hmm,
but I don't know what the color of hair was. I wouldn't be able to tell you what that was.
sure, and that's fair. And so I like those stories. I love those stories. I just like the fact that I don't know. I like it when a lot of different people who don't know each other, who have no connections whatsoever, experience similar stories. I feel like that gives validation. Does that make sense?
Well, definitely. I've heard kind of similar stories from other people, kind of some similar context. So it doesn't seem like it's a very rare phenomenon.
That's interesting. So, did you see the same person or the same figure in one house, or was it over multiple houses? Um,
It was all in one house. I told my parents about it. They were very confused. Our house, no one, our house was built, so there was no one that lived in the house previously. As far as I know, it wasn't built on any sacred burial grounds or anything like that. But who the heck knows, right?
right, absolutely. It's funny you bring up the burial grounds. I love how that's always like a key factor or whatever. That's awesome. So that was as a kid. So do you know how old you were, or roughly how old you were the last time you saw her?
I probably around the time I was 11 or 12 years old.
Okay, that's awesome. So
That's an estimate, though. I mean, that was a long time ago.
sure, absolutely. Yep, I understand completely. I have a bunch of ghost stories from when I was a little kid, and I can't even tell you. I know how old I was when I moved out of the house. I couldn't even begin to fathom how old I was when I had the experiences. So they all kind of run together, I guess. So let's move on to your teenage years. So I know you mentioned that you had some stories from when you were a teenager.
Yeah, I went to a friend's house before, and he was a good friend of mine, and he would tell me that his house was haunted, and I just say, okay, yeah, sure. You know, I kind of was always a little bit skeptical, but like his parents worked. worked a lot, and so we would frequently have full run of the house, and yeah, we'd be in one area and you would just hear something kind of in the other room, and you go and kind of see, like, think maybe someone's home. No one's there. The probably the craziest one was we were upstairs. I think we were playing N64,
Nice.
GoldenEye, of course.
Absolutely.
And and we heard a big crash come from the kind of the kitchen area. We thought someone had broken into the house, right? Because it was a loud crash, and ain't no one else was supposed to be home. So he grabbed a baseball bat. I think I had a golf club or something like that, and we were gonna go down. We were just gonna beat the heck out of whoever was in the house there.
I like the confidence. I dig that.
Yeah. When we got down there, there was no one in the house, but the one cabinet in the kitchen, a bunch of plates had fallen out and crashed onto the ground.
Hmm.
So that was legitimately, I was, and of course, my mind, I'm trying to justify, well, maybe it was leaning on there over time, and it just so happened to be the moment that it decided that was gonna, enough force was there, and the door was gonna open and the plates were gonna fall out. But it was definitely an unsettling experience.
Yeah, I could see that. It sounds like rationalizing, you know. And it's funny that you brought all of that up because I literally have a story very similar to that. You mentioned Goldeneye. You and I must be the same age group because I also grew up with a very close friend, and that's all we would do when we were kids is play Goldeneye on the N64. And him and I were in the basement, which is where his room is, and we heard walking upstairs. We thought it was his mom coming home from work, but it wasn't. And we heard a crash, and we went upstairs. And we didn't find any dishes or anything, but we just didn't know who was walking around the house. That's crazy to me. um,
Yeah, his house was weird. Like we were in the garage and we were doing some cleanup in the garage, getting just we had bikes, of course, because we didn't get driven around everywhere. So we had bikes and we were working on fixing them. And while we were in the garage, we started talking about kind of the ghosts and kind of how things were kind of weird. And when we did that, the light started to dim in and out.
oh, wow.
And yeah, like he told me some other crazy stuff. Like he saw like a shadow walk down the hallway. I never saw anything like that, so I can't, that's all hearsay. So I
Right.
don't want to make claim to anything like that. But yeah, you told me some pretty wild stuff, and they ended up moving out of the house. The whole family, they all had separate kind of experiences they never really talked about. And then one day, I guess they had all started talking about it with each other, and then they moved about a year later.
That's fair. I feel like I would do the same thing. So just out of curiosity, so at the house that you lived at when you were a kid, when you saw the lady a couple of times here and there, do you know any history of that house at all? Do you know
Well,
if anybody
the
died?
house was there was no one else that ever lived in the house. It was literally my dad had gotten a good job at a factory, and so what do most people do when they get a good job at the factory? They move to the suburb.
Makes sense.
So then we moved out to the suburb, and there was a new area, and they built the house from scratch.
Gotcha. Okay.
So there was no one else that lived in the house previously.
And then the same question with your friend's house. Do you happen to know any history of that house at all by chance? Like of any history at all, or you know?
It was an old wartimey house, so and they'd had multiple owners. I don't know if anything had ever happened in the house or not, but I know that he had multiple like owners previous to them living there.
Oh, cool. For some reason, I don't know why, but the second story that you told about you being in your friend's house at the N64, it's the N64. That's why, because our generation we love the N64, but I heard we were together. We heard the steps upstairs. We couldn't ever find anybody. A few I'm not sure when. Again, as a kid, time all kind of feels the same, I guess. But at some point, my buddy's dad was under his porch and he found an old picture of a dude in a blue suit who apparently used to live at that house. And so we feel like the ghost is probably that guy at that particular house. Or I shouldn't say ghost, I guess, but spirit or whatever. Um, if that makes sense. It was interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. I don't know. Like I would figure if the afterlife exists, I don't know why the heck I'd want to stick around in an old house that I lived in.
And that's 100% agreeable. Like one of the questions I always have is like, if I'm a ghost, if I'm not trapped in this house, why would I stay in this house? Um, and I don't obviously we don't know how the afterlife works. I guess if there is one specifically, but I feel like I agree with that statement quite a bit. Like what for example, if there's like an old abandoned hospitals that people hear or see spirits at, why would that spirit stay in that place? Why would a spirit stay in this house? Why would a spirit stay in this asylum? Why would a spirit stay in this war zone? Like that's one question that we're not ever going to be able to answer if the afterlife does exist. But and there's a few different reasonings, I guess. Residual spirits that it's just like a replay, and they're not intelligent spirits. But that still doesn't make any sense to me, I guess, especially if you're doing things. If you have a spirit, mentioned that you saw her in your room looking at you, that's not residual, right? So why is she there? I guess that's my biggest
Yeah,
question.
yeah, it is a big question, like why would anything want to stick around and just, check in, like, I don't know, previous relatives or something like that maybe, but even then, still, I mean, if there's something else after this, I'd want to go do that.
Absolutely. It's one of those things. And my, I'm sure you haven't listened to the show. In my second and third episode, my wife is a guest, and she has a brother who had passed away when he was 23, a younger brother. And her stories are he has come back to her and they've conversated after his death. And according to what she tells me, again, I can't attest to this. This is what she told me. But what she has told me is that the afterlife isn't necessarily you're just a ghost now, but there's a whole nother kind of like not paranormal, parallel universe that exists, and that you're doing stuff over there as well. So like you're not always a ghost hanging out, in this house, making chains move and stuff, but you're also have other stuff going on, and it's like a continual cycle, if that makes sense, like another dimension kind of thing. And I feel like if that's the case, why do we have these old school hauntings of people in like 18th century clothing walking around an old school house? There's a lot of contradictories, I guess, when it comes to ghost sightings, ghost experiences, and all of that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with that. And it's noticed that as technology gets better, like we have less and less footage of Bigfoot and Loch Ness monster and some of the other things out there.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and with that, as technology gets better, people are realizing how easy it is to manipulate camera footage and video footage and all of that stuff. It's actually really easy to manipulate things, in Photoshop and all of that stuff. A Bigfoot is one thing I've never really believed in. I have a couple of buddies who do, or maybe want to more than actually do, I guess. I just don't get into monsters. Like that's one thing. Like I believe in the paranormal stuff all day for some reason, but when it comes to like physical monsters, I don't get into Loch Ness, Bigfoot, the Yeti, the Mothman, that kind of stuff. I don't know why. For some reason, that feels less realistic to me than Ghost, which in reality it should be the opposite because anything can kind of be born, I guess, in the right environment. I don't know. I just don't get into monsters.
Yeah, well, and not to get off topic from paranormal, but if you're if you want to know if you want want to look into something that's really freaky, that missing 411, that's some really freaky stuff.
Missing 411. I'm writing that down right now. What is that?
It's it's basically it's this guy that found out that the U.S. Parks was covering up all these people that went missing in the U.S. Parks, and they were able to take all the data and aggregate it together. And there's a certain number of cases that are truly phenomenal in their in the whole scope of the case, where like kids go missing and they're found hundreds of kilometers, like their body, or just sometimes their body's never even found. It's just clothing items, and they're found 100 kilometers away or 30 kilometers up the side of a mountain. That's almost impossible for a regular person to climb.
I am definitely interested in that because, like I said, maybe I don't believe in the monster stuff, but I'm definitely all about conspiracy theories. So, missing 411. That is fantastic. I'll definitely check that out. And that's cool. Have you ever heard this? Again, we're off topic, but that's okay. Have you heard of like the California like flight rescue crew? What do you call them, guys? I'm not really sure. I guess off the top of my head, but apparently there are staircases in the middle of like the wilderness in California. Have you heard of that at all?
I heard of the phenomenon. It was on a missing 411 forum where I'd run across that kind of phenomenon. I don't know if I believe it or not because again, no one has any photos.
Which is also
So
weird.
it's
I just feel like it's a weird
go ahead.
rumor. I think it's just a weird rumor to talk about, but apparently it's a thing, and there are no photos, which is also interesting in itself, and it makes it easier to, like, disregard, I guess. But I don't know. That's just a weird thing. And my instinct says, if that is the case, it's probably just, like, weird Satanist or whatever who just build staircases just to fuck with people. I don't really know. But I don't know. For some reason, that rabbit hole fascinated me when I found it on Reddit a while back.
Yeah, you gotta be careful on Reddit and those places. Some of those rabbit holes can lead you to some pretty messed up stuff.
That is a fact. Absolutely. All right, so back on topic to the paranormal, I guess. The one thing I'm really super interested in is your prison stories. So you used to work in a federal prison, and you have stories, paranormal stories from that prison, correct?
Yeah, I got a couple of stories and a little bit is kind of hearsay and that just some weird kind of stuff that happened there that kind of gets the hairs on your back kind of standing up.
Oh, absolutely. So I visited a couple of jails. I'm not a cop. I've never been a cop, but I have a couple of buddies who are cops, and I've seen their jail cells. And then I've been to the Ohio State Reform. I live in Ohio. I've been to the Ohio State Reformatory in Mansfield, Ohio, which is where they filmed um, the Shawshank Redemption, and then some scenes in Air Force One. And it's apparently or historically a haunted prison. And I really, for some reason, I really get into jails and prisons and asylums. And I feel like it's because the energy in those places are negative a lot of the times, and so you get a lot of. I feel like negative energy is more powerful than positive energy, which sounds like a plot to a movie, I guess. But so I'm definitely interested in to hear your prison experiences.
Okay, so yeah, I worked at a federal prison as a correctional officer, prison guard for a while, and some people had talked about kind of stories, especially the midnight crew, right? It's generally it's on midnights. That's when everything's kind of quieted down. Uh, Day staff have gone home, and it generally it the only people that are up are the officers, and they're walking around doing their rounds, making sure everyone's alive and that, and doing their counts and stuff.
Sure.
So at night, people would talk about there's certain ranges. So range is kind of like it's the row of cells. It's the common area in front of the cells. Call them ranges, cell blocks, that sort of stuff. And they'd be doing their walk and that, and you could hear keys jangling. You could hear people talking even though everyone is asleep, stuff like that. There's a particularly old area of the prison that previously used to house female offenders, and before that, it was a mental health unit, and lots of stuff going on there. And sometimes you'd even have the inmates would be complaining about stuff as well, which was interesting.
Hmm.
But they hear lots of stories. Keys jangling, people walking around. Sometimes you'd hear muffled talking in the background, that sort of stuff. And again, I'm not a huge believer in that sort of stuff. So I was, you hear it and you think, okay, people psyching themselves up, or people, they're just sort of, because one thing you'll learn about correctional officers is there's a lot of tall tales and that. So
Sure.
people like the good fish story. So
Fair enough.
um so yeah, so heard all this different stuff. So I'm working on this unit on midnights. Done it many times before. Never had any issues. Well, it was probably around 1:30 in the morning, and I thought I heard someone walking up to the office area that I was in. And I thought it was the manager, right? Because they're supposed to do rounds on midnights and double check everything's fine. So I thought someone had forgotten to radio me that the manager was on their way. Um, so I'm waiting for the manager to show up. Never shows up. But I heard walking in the area, so I thought, well, maybe someone's playing a prank on me. So I get out of the office and I'm like, well, I'm pretty much due for a security round anyway. So I go and I do my round, check all the doors, everything, nothing. So I get back to the desk and I'm like, okay, just overactive imagination, right? You're doing your rounds. It's 1:30 in the morning. No one likes working midnights. It's part of a rotational shift, so it's not like I'm working 3 midnights in a row. So okay. So I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden I hear keys jangling. Clear as day, I hear keys jangling. And we got these big Folger Adams keys. They're pretty big keys. They're not like your regular house key. So they make a very clear audible sound when they jangle. So now I'm like, okay, well, someone's here. No doubt about it. I heard it. Someone's here. So I get up and I go and I look. I think someone. I don't know. Can you swear on this podcast?
Sure, absolutely.
So I think someone's fucking around. All right. So I'm out there and I even phone the post that the person has to be at if they want to get out to the unit that I'm at. And I'm like, does anyone come out this way? No, no. And they're laughing like, oh, you hearing stuff out there? I'm like, oh, well, maybe. I don't know. Like, I'm just, yeah, I'm just gonna work on my paperwork and that, and just kind of tune it out. So do another security round. We're approaching about 3 o'clock now in the morning, so that's about the time that we do a post shift. So getting to that time, and I'm sitting at the desk now. Behind the desk is this, it's this, what do you call them? The cork boards where we put up like all of our post orders and our count and all that sort of stuff. So it's on this cork board that's anchored into the wall. I need to specify here that it's anchored into the wall, one of those metal anchors. Now the walls there are very, very thick, so it's a metal anchor in the wall. So I'm sitting there doing my thing, minding my own business, and one of the anchors pops out of the wall behind me. And I'm sitting at the desk, just this big bang behind me. Well, I'm over top of the desk now, and I'm just like, if I was at any point in time fatigued, that fatigue is completely gone. Now, one of the metal anchors that was in the wall had actually popped out of the wall.
Hmm.
So again, you're talking coincidence. You think, okay, like earlier I said about the dishes, maybe it was just leaning against the door, and finally it was just enough force that it opened up and the dishes fell out. So you're telling me this place, it's been here for over 100 years, this cork board has probably been there for quite a few years, never moved, never touched. So the second that I'm sitting there on midnights around 3 o'clock in the morning, that's when the pressure gives out and the thing pops out.
Right.
I
And
don't know. I don't know.
yeah.
Can't give you a clear answer on that.
And it's
I
early
do
in.
know.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I do know that it was a. I was wide awake and I was more than happy when my relief post came to relieve me. I was more than happy.
I bet. Yeah, man, and I agree. And I mentioned earlier the term rationalization, and I feel like putting the science together of how that would happen, it's rationalization. Obviously, something happened there that's not explainable. Like that's crazy.
Yeah, I mean it's not explainable to me. I don't know quite what to make out of it except it happened and it yeah whatever if it was just I guess the place shifting and it just happened to shift just in the right way when I'm sitting there, who knows. But I
Well,
do have a couple more interesting ones if you got the time.
oh, absolutely. But before we get there, real quick, I mentioned on the show a lot of times is I'm all about feelings. I honestly feel like us as people or whatever that we have feelings and emotions that we may not understand completely, but at the same time I trust it when it happens. So that being said, when that happened with the corkboard, what was your feeling? Did you feel negative? Did you feel positive? What I didn't mention that you were ready to get out of there. But what do you think that was? And I want you to be like honest and not like on like what did your feeling tell you at that moment?
Well, if you work in a prison, you have no feelings. So
That's fair.
I'm kidding. Uh, well, I mean, it was shock, surprise. Then it was, I guess, a feeling of, I don't know, I want to say maybe in the moment dread, because it's like, okay, this really happened. And then all the other experience that everyone always talks about comes flashing back to your mind. And you're thinking, okay, am I stuck in the Paranormal Activity movie now? Like, is there some fucking demon thing roaming around here I can't fucking see?
Right.
And of course, you rationalize it and everything comes back to reality. And that's only a few seconds where you're kind of thinking, like, okay, this is it. This is real now.
That's fair. And that's one of those things. Like I've been in a lot of experiences, and I feel like you can tell the difference between a bad thing and a good thing, if that makes sense. Now, again, being in a
Yeah,
prison,
I guess yeah, I mean, I guess I don't want to say that it was, I don't want to say that it was bad. Like, I wouldn't say that there was anything like like, anything particularly negatively foreboding or anything like that. Like, you know, I, it's not like, it's not like the movie Hereditary or anything like that, where some things I felt anything was manipulating something purposely in the background. Yeah, I wouldn't say it was a neutral or yeah, it was more of a neutral. Sorry, it was
no,
more
fair
of a
enough.
neutral than anything else.
Fair enough. All right, well, let's get into your other stories. So you mentioned you had a few other ones. Let's hear them.
Okay, so other one, not so dramatic, of course. I was working at one of the units the one day, and so where I was standing is just outside the doorway that enters onto the range, and I was talking to my partner, who was working at the same unit as me, and I was talking to her, and now there's none of the inmates were out of their cells. We had just gotten on post. We had just finished. We were waiting for morning count to come in before we started our routine. And I felt someone walk behind me. And I thought maybe one of the other officers was going to go down range, or maybe they were down range and I didn't notice, and they had come off the unit. Maybe they were doing a check or something like that, or something else. So I did a shoulder check in either direction, and there was no one there. And my partner's looking like, what? And I said, I don't know. Like I could have sworn someone walked behind me. And she got like all white in the face because she's a big believer in that sort of stuff. But yeah, it was interesting. Again, didn't really feel negative, didn't really feel positive. It just felt like someone had just walked behind me. So I don't know.
Yeah, I believe that absolutely. I mean, and I feel like that happens to a lot of people a lot, and they just don't realize it. But like as intelligent beings, I feel like we have that sense of people being around us. You can feel when somebody's looking at you. That kind of stuff. And yeah, that's crazy.
So I got one more here that I'll talk about that I thought was interesting. Now again, it didn't directly happen to me, but what it was is so one of the um, the officers I was working noticed on one of the cameras that it looked like something had come in through the window of one of the ranges and was it was like this, like almost like a small fog, and it was just kind of hovering up near the corner. And they were kind of freaked out, and so their partner's like, well, whatever it is, like maybe it's a bird or it's a shadow of something. So they went upstairs. Well, it's interesting because on the video you can see as they enter into the area, you can see whatever the fog or whatever actually moves back out the window and it's gone. And it's interesting. I don't know what it is or anything like that, but it wasn't like very thick. It kind of looked like like a wispy sort of, like a very, very translucent wispy sort of cloud.
That's interesting.
So I don't know I don't know what to say with what it was or what it wasn't. I mean, I watched the video, and I mean, I don't think anything's been modified or edited in there. So yeah, it's just a kind of strange kind of experience.
Sure. And I've heard of stories very similar to that actually, and they've even made a couple of movies about it. I don't know about you, but one of my favorite movies of all time is Halloween, and the person who made that is named John Carpenter, and he made a movie called The Fog, and it's about ghostly fog, to simplify it, I guess. And I've heard, watching Unsolved Mysteries and shit like that, I've heard of a lot of stories actually that involve, fog and mist and that kind of stuff. And a reason being, a possibility that is a thing is because fog and mist is a natural element and it's easy to manipulate. And my whole go-to is the word energy, and energy can easily, theoretically, manipulate fog and mist and that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting for sure.
I got one more. This is like a bonus story.
Hell yeah, let's hear it.
I got one more here. Okay, so this one is a little bit different. It's kind of interesting. Get it was a new offender, and we're placing them into their cell. And later on, they had asked the staff. They said, can we get a priest here? And well, why do you want a priest? And because there's dark energy in my cell, and I won't be able to sleep. I can't stay here until this is gone. And okay, sure. We believe me, we've heard quite the gambit of excuses over the years.
I believe that.
So that was definitely a new one, and just kept saying and insisting, absolutely insisting, like I will not stay here, and I'm gonna make a bit of a ruckus, and that if this isn't taken care of. So, what I think the manager finally said, well, let's get the priest down here then. So called the chaplain, and the chaplain came down and did a blessing on the cell, and never heard another peep from the offender. They were quite happy with that, and they didn't have any other issues. So I don't know. Maybe they saw something or whatever. I've heard from a couple of offenders over the years tell me that they also hear things at night, and they'll see shadows on the wall move on their own and stuff like that. And so again, got to take anything that they say too with a grain of salt too.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm sure being in a prison, I've dealt with I worked in loss prevention for years, and so I dealt with a lot of shoplifters and criminals of that nature. And you're gonna hear a lot of bullshit, dealing with any kind of criminal offenders, I suppose. But there's something to that, I think, and especially to an institution of that nature. A federal prison is I feel like a haven for fucking negative energy. Whether it be just ghosts themselves or people who had passed away who were in prison there. And I don't know, did that prison have executions or no?
So in Canada, the federal system did not do executions. It was the provincial system that did.
No, fair enough. But even still, though, I mean,
well, people have died. There's no doubt about it. People have died in all the major prisons, pretty much.
Sure,
it happens.
Makes sense. Absolutely. So that's definitely an interesting topic to me, and I feel like all of those experiences are pretty valid. I would say. I honestly, I've talked to a few people who've worked in prisons. I've talked to a few people who have, worked in a field or been in a field, hospitals, hospices, that kind of stuff. And I feel like anybody who's worked in that field sees and feels things, whether they believe in it or not, if that makes sense.
I'd agree with that. That seems like a valid statement.
All right, man. Well, again, I really do appreciate you joining the show today. Russell Barton, be sure to check out Russell's Coffee Breath Conversations. The podcast available on most locations, Apple, Spotify. And again, man, I appreciate you being on the show. I appreciate hearing your stories. And I may follow up with you going forward and try to talk about them deeper, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, it was a great experience, and I really appreciate you, inviting me on to the podcast today to talk about my experiences. It was great, and I hope that your listeners are able to, at the very least, get freaked out. At the most, they have a valuable experience and get some new information.
Well, that's the idea. And one of my big things is trying to learn about it. And I know early on you mentioned that you don't necessarily believe in it. So my question to you is, how do you have all of these experiences and not necessarily believe in the paranormal?
Well, I wouldn't say it's not that I don't necessarily believe in the paranormal. It's how do I mesh that with the idea of an afterlife and that sort of thing? Can something happen that's so horrible that it's like a cigarette burn in the atmosphere, and it burns into the area around it, so then that experience becomes an energy source that, when enough energy is applied, it reenacts itself enough times until it fades out completely? Or there's all sorts of different theories. I mean, you can start talking about parallel dimensions, quantum physics, all sorts of different stuff, but I can't discount what I've seen. What it means, well, that's still up for interpretation.
Absolutely. And I'm the exact same way. I will never tell you that I believe in one particular thing, because I have no idea. And I feel like most people, well, all people probably have no real idea. So again, I mean, I appreciate you being on the show, and that was a great conversation, and I can't wait to check out Coffee Breath Conversations.
Thanks, man. Can't wait to hear this episode again when it drops.
And I'll let you know it's going to drop here probably tomorrow, which would be, I guess, August 3rd, which is a Monday.
Awesome. Can't wait, man.
All right, man, have a great night.
Yeah, you too. Bye.
Again, huge thank you to Russell Barton for joining the show. Be sure to check out Coffee Breath Conversations, available on all major podcasting platforms. It sounds pretty awesome, and I don't know about you guys, but I am super into conspiracy theories. Some I believe in, some I don't, but all of them are interesting, all of them have valid points, and all of them are worth drinking coffee and listening to. So definitely check it out on Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts. And that's going to go ahead and wrap up episode 20 of Paranormal Axetivities. And this is where I do my whole spiel, basically. But again, be sure to check out Paranormal Axetivities merchandise at teespring.com/stores/paranormal-activities.com. And again, that will be in the episode information, so you don't have to remember that. Also, be sure to check out the boardroom every Tuesday night, 8 o'clock, if you're into sports, basketball, football, all of that kind of stuff. Be sure to check out regularly scheduled hostilities every Thursday at 6 p.m. live on alleverythingentertainment.com. Again, alleverythingentertainment.com has a ton of podcasts, a ton of articles, and just a lot of cool shit, whether you're into sports, wrestling, superheroes, movies, TV shows. There's something for everybody. So check them out. And be sure to tell your friends, tell your family, go to Apple, go to Pandora, go to Spotify, hit subscribe. And at the end of the day, let's just keep learning about the paranormal together.